Dear students, welcome to the very last class of this course. Now, after this lecture, we will be done with this course, right? So I'm sure many of you are happy hearing this. So without further delay, let's move on to today's lecture content. Now, in this lecture, I'm going to do a little practice work. We are going to practice another example of applying independent samples t-test. So let's go down and find out the question that we are going to solve today. Yes, here is the question. Let me zoom in a little bit. Yes. So the question is there any statistically significant difference between the mean calorie intake of the people of Dhaka and Sylhet? So for this question, we are going to use the same data set. Now, by reading this question, we can easily say that we have to apply independent samples t-test to solve this question. Why? Because number one, we are going to compare two different means here, and number two, the means belong to two different independent groups. One of the group is the people in my sample from Dhaka, and the other group consists of the people in my group from Sylhet. So again, we are comparing the mean calorie intake of the people who belong to two different groups. One is the people from Dhaka, and the other one is the people from Sylhet. And you can obviously say that both of these groups are independent. So yes, that's why we have to use independent samples t-test. Now please remember, we are going to do the comparison between the people of Dhaka and Sylhet. Now let's go back to SPSS. So this is the variable view. So we need to go to the data view here. Now, I'm assuming that you know all the basics and you have thoroughly gone through the previous video. So in this practice session, I'm not going to explain everything in detail. Alright? So I'm just going to briefly solve this problem. So if you have not understood the previous video, please go back and watch it very carefully and then practice on your own and then start with this video. So yes, in order to solve this problem, we have to go to analyze first. Then we have to go to compare means, and finally we have to go to independent samples t-test. So I select this option. Now again, I have the window here. So here for my convenience, I click the right mouse button and then it displays the variable names. So from here, I have to bring in some of the variables to the test variable box. Which of the variables do I need to shift? From the question, I can easily say that I'm going to compare the calorie intake, right? So from here, I have to find out the calorie intake option. So if I take a look, the second last option is calorie intake. So I have to select that and then I have to select this button. See, the calorie intake option is under the test variable box. Now the next thing that I have to do is I have to select the grouping variable. Now again, the question says calorie intake comparison between the people of Dhaka and Sylhet. So the grouping is done based on which variable here? Again, the grouping is done based on which variable? Yes, the grouping of Dhaka and Sylhet is being done based on the hometown variable. So where is the hometown variable? It's here. So I have to select hometown and then I have to click on this button. See, hometown is here. Now I have one more task left. So I have to select which two groups I'm going to compare. Again, I have to select which two groups within the hometown variable I have to compare. So as I said, I'm comparing Dhaka and Sylhet. So before selecting Dhaka and Sylhet, we need to find out what are the codes that we used to identify Dhaka and Sylhet. So in order to find out the codings of Dhaka and Sylhet, let's go back to the questionnaire. So as it is written here at the top, yes, it's written that for Dhaka we used code 1 and for Sylhet we used code 4. So we have to type 1 and 4. So let's go back to SPSS and here select define groups. So here I'm going to type 1 and in the second box I'm going to type 4 and then continue. So we are done here. Now let's select OK. So yes, the result is ready. So let's take a look at the results one by one. Now just as before, in the first table, I have the mean values. So in the first row, I have the mean calorie intake for Dhaka people, which is 1925.5. So 1925 calorie per day. So that's the calorie intake for Dhaka people. On the other hand, in the second row, I have the mean value for Sylhet. And as we can see here, the mean value for Sylhet is 1879.6. So 1879.6 calorie intake per day. So these are the two mean values. Now, if I go into the second table, I will obviously see the mean difference right here. The mean difference between Dhaka and Sylhet people is 45.9 calorie. So if we want to cross check, we can go to the first table and calculate the difference. It will be the same, exactly same. So again, the mean difference between these two groups' calorie intake is 45.9. So we are done with the mean value. Now the last thing that is remaining is the p-value for measuring statistical significance of this result. So again, for statistical significance, we need to do two separate set of hypothesis tests. One is Lovin's test for equality of variances, and the other one is t-test for equality of means. Now let's go back to the questionnaire. Now let's go down and then zoom in. So here, first the Lovin's test for equality of variances. Now just as before, for this test, the null hypothesis would be there is no statistically significant difference between the variance of the calorie intake of the people of Dhaka and Sylhet. So I have written the null hypothesis more precisely here. So just as before, in null hypothesis, we assume that there is no statistically significant difference between the variance. On the other hand, the alternate hypothesis says that there is a statistically significant difference between the variance of the calorie intake of the people of Dhaka and Sylhet. So for this test, what we need to do now? We have to go back to SPSS and check the p-value. So let's go back. So under Lovin's test for equality of variances, we have the p-value right here. So here is the p-value. What is the p-value here? 0.212. Now, is it more than 5% or less than 5%? Obviously, it's more than 5%. Now, just as before, if the p-value is more than 5%, then we cannot reject the null hypothesis. Again, whenever the p-value is more than 5%, we cannot reject the null hypothesis. So let's go back. So here, we cannot reject this null hypothesis. Or we can also say we have to accept this null hypothesis. So we are saying there is no statistically significant difference between these two variances. So yes, there is no difference, or we can also say that both of the variances are equal. Again, both of the variances are equal. So now let's go back. So we have just found out, according to Lovin's test for equality of variances, both of the variances are equal. So based on the result, which of these two rows do we accept? Yes, we accept the top one, because the top one says equal variances assumed. So we accept the top row and we eliminate the bottom row. So we cannot rely on any data provided in the bottom row. So we have to look at the top row data here. So now that we are done with the Lovin's test for equality of variances and we have found out that we have to rely on the data provided in the top row, now we can move on to t-test for equality of means. And by now, we already know that for t-test for equality of means, the p-value is given here. Now, as we have rejected the bottom row, we cannot rely on this data. So we have to consider the p-value provided in the top row, this one. So now, let's go back to the questionnaire again. So for the second hypothesis test, which is t-test for equality of means, the null hypothesis is there is no statistically significant difference between the two means of the calorie intake of the people of Dhaka and Sylhet. And the alternate hypothesis says there is a statistically significant difference between the means of the calorie intake of the people of Dhaka and Sylhet. So the first one says no statistically significant difference, whereas the second one says there is a statistically significant difference. Now let's go back to SPSS. What is the p-value here? The p-value is 0.907 or 90.7%. Is it greater than 5%? Definitely. It's much higher than 5%. So when the p-value is greater than 5%, what do? When the p-value is greater than 5%, we say that we cannot reject the null hypothesis. Again, we cannot reject the null hypothesis, or you can say we have to accept the null hypothesis. So let's go back. So here, as I just said, as the p-value is greater than 5%, we cannot reject the null hypothesis, or we have to accept the null hypothesis. So we have found out that there is no statistically significant difference between the two means of the calorie intake of the people of Dhaka and Sylhet. So again, there is no statistically significant difference. Why? Because the p-value is much higher than 5%. So if we go back to the question now, the question asked, is there any statistically significant difference? The answer is no. as per the result of independent samples t-test, there is no statistically significant difference between the mean calorie intake of the people of Dhaka and Sylhet. That's our answer. So finally, I'm done with all the lecture contents of today. And as I said earlier, this is the very last class that is going to be conducted by me in this whole course in the summer semester. Now, throughout the course till now, I have tried my best to deliver the content in such a way so that it's easy to understand for you and at the same time relatable to your real life experience. Now, if you have any type of confusions regarding any of the chapters, please feel free to contact me anytime. And as I said earlier, I'm always going to be available for you to address any type of problems that you have, be it your student life, be it your professional life, or be it your personal life. You can reach out to me anytime, anywhere, through any media. All right? So my part is done here. I would like to thank all of you for going through the lectures with such patience and endurance. I know doing the online semester the first time is very difficult, but even then you did it. You made it this far, and I'm sure you are going to make it till the end of the semester with flying colors. So best of luck to all of you. This is JSH signing off. Cheers.